You are listening to the Pilgrim on the 405 with Will Christ. Join him as he and his guests discover how businesses thrive in California.
Well, welcome to the Pilgrim on the 405 on this beautiful day here in Southern California. We have today with us one of the top plastic surgeons in California and maybe even in the country, with Dr. Sanjay Grover, who is a long-time resident in Newport Beach. Welcome, Dr. Grover.
Good morning, Will. Thanks for having me here.
So tell us a little bit about what you do in Newport Beach.
Well, Will, I'm a board-certified plastic surgeon, and I specialize in cosmetic surgery, and I focus on cosmetic surgery of the face, the nose, the breast, and the body, and that involves surgical aspects as well as non-surgical aspects.
Now, so often we think that is mostly women looking for that, but I understand you also work with men.
Definitely. I'd say about 15% of my patients are men, and some come on their own, and others are brought in by their spouses or significant others. We see guys from as young as 18 to 20, all the way up to their 70s or even 80s, right? So some guys may come in for procedures such as issues with gynecomastia or male breast enlargement. That could be from just hormonal issues that happen during puberty, or sometimes it's because of using steroids with bodybuilding and weightlifting. I have guys who come in even for nipple reductions itself, not just the glandular tissue, but the nipple. And then, of course, they come in for items like liposuction, rhinoplasty, facelifts, Botox, injectables, you name it.
So how long has your practice been in Newport Beach?
I've been practicing for 20 years, and I started in Beverly Hills, and then I moved down here 18 years ago. So it's been about 18 years that I've been in Newport Beach. I grew up in Orange County, so when we were having kids, we decided to move back down to Orange County.
Very nice. So tell us a little bit about what has this virus done for your practice? How have you had to pivot?
Yeah, well, the effects of COVID-19 have been significant for plastic surgeons and many businesses. And so we're going to have to adapt. We have adapted, and I think things are changing. And even though we're resuming practice now, there's definitely new changes that we've put in place. So during the time that we were staying at home, personally, I had a lot of interest from patients for consultations online. And so we've always done virtual consults for years, just because we have patients who come in from out of town or out of country. And so we would communicate with them via Skype or other type of mechanisms. We have more significant or more appropriate methods these days that are encrypted and secure, where we will have virtual consults with patients. So I've been spending a lot of time with patients doing virtual consults. What we would have patients do is they would submit their photos ahead of time and any questions or concerns, and then we would meet on a consultation one-on-one, just like they were in the office. Using similar methods as we're doing right now with Zoom, but with other methods or technologies.
Well, as people come back as we open up and people come back into the office, will you continue that?
Well, that's a good question. So, those virtual consults were actually very successful, and they were very convenient for the patients too. We got a lot of good feedback from patients. It was nice for them because sometimes, when you see a patient, you don't always know exactly how long that patient's going to be with you during that consultation, because patients can have different amount of questions, different concerns, or different issues. And so some may be shorter and some may be a little bit longer. And so by having this platform set up, patients are in their own home or at their workplace, and once we're ready, we text them, and so they're able to do their thing until we're ready, and then they come online. And so they've been very happy with that. They don't have to travel in if they're coming in for an hour or 2 hours away or flying in. We could do the consultation online. And so we're going to continue doing that. We started operating a few weeks ago, so we're limiting the interactions that we have in the office right now. So we're still doing virtual consults, but we're seeing our pre-op and post-operative patients as well, and then also surgical patients when I'm operating on them. But of course, we're putting in certain precautions to help, for the safety of everybody, including the patient, the staff, myself, et cetera.
Does this make it more efficient, efficient use of your time and of patient time?
Definitely, definitely it does. It does keep us online, or on time. We have to try and really stay to a tight schedule. So we do try and do that, but it makes it much easier for the patient, and they're able to do. They're more efficient in their day because they don't have to drive in or stay in the waiting room or anything like that.
Will this allow you to see more patients?
It does in some ways. If I were to extend this to after hours or weekends, that would definitely happen. But I'm married and I have 3 children, and they're quite busy, so I still try to limit it to the business hours.
Well, that's a very interesting point, because one of my advisors is Stephen Kotler, and he talks about flow and how to live in flow. Spend more time in flow. But he says in order to do that, you have to limit the time that you are online. You have to get clear about when you are shutting it down, because presumably you would be able to do consults from home as well as from your office. And so there has to be a time of turning it off.
Yeah, for sure. There's limited time in my day or week for me to operate. So there's only so many cases I can do in the time allotted. So it doesn't make sense to just, do consults all 24 hours a day when I won't be able to, to push those people off months and months and months and months.
Ah, I see. Well, then does this give you more time to just be yourself?
Well, that's interesting. During this time, a lot of practices and physicians and many people in different industries have had to adapt and learn what to do in the future. And so it's not like we've had free time. I've been quite busy with virtual consultations, meeting with other colleagues, discussing plans for reopening, what to do, how to handle staff, how to handle employees, safety issues, and then also what things to do to make the businesses more efficient. And then it's been a good time to even focus on educational advances. A lot of colleagues gathering online and sharing thoughts and ideas about different techniques and procedures, and so it's been very productive.
Well, that's what I mean by having more time to focus on other things other than just meeting with that patient, just operating. And now, do you think this will continue after the COVID constraints are removed?
Yeah, I think a number of things will continue. So we will continue to offer virtual consults, because we found this to be so successful. We will give patients the options of whether they want to do a virtual consult or if they want to do an inpatient in-office consult. Now, of course, when somebody books for surgery or if they request, we will see them still several weeks before their surgery for an actual inpatient visit, so that it's not where they just show up to surgery without actually meeting me in person and me meeting them, and examining them appropriately to make sure that they're having the right procedure done. So that will continue. As far as interactions with colleagues, for sure, I think colleagues in actually industry, everybody's been adapting, and I think we're going to see that more and more. We've found how successful this has been to have these interactions or meetings on Zoom or webinars, and so I think we're finding that that's going to continue on. Whereas in the past, we've always had meetings that were at a given location, and you had to be present for that. Well, this has forced a lot of societies to hold their meetings online and open up to that thought and concept. And we've been thinking about that for a number of years, but this really forced our hand. And I think that we're going to continue to do so. It's been very successful.
In my business, working with businesses to help leaders get what they want from their business, and working with leadership teams, what I've found is the 350 colleagues that I have around the country. I mean, we're meeting on Zoom every week, and it's really improved the quality of the work that I can do with my clients. Is that true for you? I mean, not that your quality could ever be exceeded, but is there an opportunity for physicians and surgeons to improve their quality without expending all the time to go off to a conference?
Well, I appreciate your kind words, but they call it practice for a reason. We are always continuing getting better and better what we do. And if you feel that you've got it all figured out, well, then you're not going to improve. You got to continue to look for ways to do things better, get better results, make things easier for the patient. And so this has really opened up a lot of opportunity. Now we're able to interact, just like you said, you're interacting with a number of your colleagues around the country. Well, of course, you're able to interact with more colleagues around the country, but also internationally. There's excellent plastic surgeons throughout the world. And so we've been able to interact with a number of international colleagues.
Well, that's what I found, that once you put your discussion group online, you are global. And it the only thing that keeps that from being global is inviting and people being willing to join the conversation.
Exactly.
And now, one other thing that in my experience of going to a 2 or 3 day conference off site is all of this information comes like a fire hose, but in a Zoom meeting, it's in smaller bites on a more regular basis. Do you find that to be true with your colleagues?
Yeah, no, that's definitely the case. There are benefits of being together. Of course, there's more social interaction and other activities where you're learning in a less formal environment. And so there's definitely benefits to that. But when you're on a Zoom call and you're doing a meeting, it does tend to be more focused, and people seem to be quite open in sharing their thoughts. And so it's nice to be able to sit in your office or your living room or whatever and be involved in a call with somebody else and really get to feel like you're having that one-on-one conversation with a large group.
Yeah. It's when my wife and I have been to Alaska, to the villages north of Fairbanks, out on the Arctic Circle, and the schools there are isolated except for high bandwidth video conferencing, so that one school can communicate with 4 or 5 other schools. And we participated in an elder showing the rest of the communities, the school communities, how to use traditional techniques to butcher a porcupine. And the quality of that was just astounding. I mean, here's one elder talking to 25 different school venues. It's amazing. And that was there because of the particular constraints of the Alaskan climate and distance.
Sure.
And what to some degree, what COVID has brought to us is similar constraints. And we have the ability to thrive in these circumstances.
Definitely. I definitely think so.
And so, while we can focus, so often we focus on the death and the pain and the suffering, which is real, but as human beings, we always live within certain constraints, and these have brought more constraints, but that also brings forth the kind of entrepreneurial changes and adaptations that I think are amazing. And that's why I'm so happy to hear that that's happening with physicians and surgeons.
Yeah, it is interesting. We're doing that, and I am surprised at some places where you think that they would have these interactions or these precautions put in place. There are places where they're not being too cautious, and we're seeing that on the news where people are gathering and they're not being socially distant, et cetera. I mean, I think many in the plastic surgery community are trying to keep up very high standards. We're having patients fill out a questionnaire beforehand. We're taking their temperature before they come into the office. We're limiting the flow traffic in the office. We're wearing masks, of course. Before surgery, we're testing patients, doing PCR COVID-19 testing to make sure they're not an asymptomatic carrier, because that would affect their ability to recover, and surgery would affect their ability to get over a COVID-19 infection. So we're really trying to put a lot of safety precautions in place.
And I think some of that has to do with taking responsibility.
Of course.
And there seems to be a divide in the country between people who are doing their best to take responsibility and others who are I guess kind of seeing it as just a fate. It'll either happen or it won't. It won't happen to me. I don't have to take responsibility for that. Uh, that seems to be an interesting difference uh, in your practice when people come to you. This is all elective. Well, is it all elective surgery, or is it mostly elective surgery?
It's mostly elective surgery. There are certain things that occur that patients need something done to, and it's because of a physical condition or um, complication from previous surgery or something like that. So, but you're right, it's elective in the nature that we're not getting called in for. I'm not getting called in for a trauma call that I need to take care of for somebody who just was in a car accident right then.
So these are people who are taking responsibility. They're making choices.
Of course. And we're giving them those options, and we're telling them what our standards are. And if they want to, live up to those standards and see somebody and follow those standards, well, then they're going to come see us. Otherwise, there's other choices out there, and they can find somebody else who would probably not require certain testings and things like that.
Well, now, for your surgery, what percentage of that is covered by insurance?
It's essentially 100% elective fee for service. There are a few things just on occasion where, say, if somebody's doing a septorhinoplasty or has an airway problem and they have a nose surgery, that may be covered by insurance. Sometimes somebody's undergoing a breast reduction, that could be covered by insurance. Or if they've had perhaps a hernia along with a tummy tuck or abdominoplasty, that could potentially be covered by insurance. Or had a complication from a breast implant, ruptured implant, or extra scar tissue or something like that. Those items sometimes can be covered by insurance.
Okay, so people really are making a decision and using resources, time, and money to make changes to themselves.
Exactly.
Well, I just find that so interesting that there are people in the world who just do not seem to take responsibility. That's a big difference.
Yeah, no, we're seeing a number of people who are acting like this never happened, and they're gathering in large groups, and they're shoulder by shoulder, and I think we're going to see a second wave of COVID-19 infections, and we need to still be careful.
Yeah. Well, let's talk a little bit about business now. Sometimes when I talk to attorneys, uh, um, other people engineers who've done extensive work in graduate school to prepare themselves, build their skills, and I ask them, and I'll ask you, so how did you do in the medical school course about running a business, running a practice?
I think I missed that day.
That day.
There was a course. Yeah.
Well, so where did you learn to run a practice, to run a business?
Yeah, it's interesting. My father was a general surgeon, and my mom ran his practice. So I got some tips from them. Of course, when I started my practice, even though I started my own practice, I shared an office with another surgeon or two, one up in Beverly Hills, one down here in Newport Beach. And so I was able to learn things from them. They've been in practice for 20 plus years ahead of me. So I picked up things from them, and then I started to learn myself, and just from trial and error, right? You learn things, and what works best for you. Just because somebody else is using one method doesn't mean that that's the best method for yourself.
Well, what kinds of things did you learn? along the way in your 20 years of practice? What things have you learned about running a business?
Well, there's so many things that are involved with running a business and also being sustainable and profitable, right? We have to learn how to promote ourselves and market effectively, and that doesn't necessarily mean print media, but or radio or anything like that. But you have to get people aware of you in order to come in. So there's got to be some mechanism for that. Then you need to know how to treat the patients appropriately when they come in the office, and that means having the right staff, the right office, the right decor, the right surgery center, the right products or implants or anything that we're going to offer. We want to offer things that are beneficial to patients and that are safe as well. So all these things we have to learn how to function, and the flow of the day needs to be appropriate, needs to be handled effectively. We need to look at our expenses. We need to look at what things are costing, and so there's so many things that have to be looked at. That really, it's not just taking care of patients. It is a business for sure.
Hmm. Well, would you consider yourself an entrepreneur?
Of course, any physician who's in private practice is an entrepreneur.
Versus somebody on the staff of Kaiser Permanente.
Correct. Somebody who may be employed by a large practice group, they don't have to worry about all these things. They just go see the patients.
Well, to what degree are you involved in the business part of it? I mean, you really are the talent, right? And you're called upon to do the work. So, to what extent do you participate in the sales part, or in the running the business part, the IT, the HR? To what extent are you involved with that?
Yeah, I'm very involved with every aspect of my practice, and fortunately, I have my wife who helps me as well, and she's an attorney by trade, and so she's very sharp on things, and so she helps me run many aspects of the practice. She's not necessarily in the office very much, but she takes care of a lot of things from home. We also have 3 kids in the Grover household to manage. But I have her, and then I also have an office manager here in the office, and we've got an excellent staff, excellent patient coordinator in front office.
How many people are on your staff?
We have 3 full-time people. In addition, we have an esthetician and nurse, but 3 full-time admin staff.
Good. So were there ever times in your business journey that you really didn't know what to do next?
Well, I think we're always learning, and there's been different steps. I recently took on a big project in building out a new office and surgery center, and so that's a new venture for myself, and so I had to evaluate that and find out the best way to do it, and to bring that forth.
It seems to me that the 2 parts of running a practice, one is this learning, as you mentioned, learning how to get better as a surgeon. And then the other is how to get better as a business. You talked about becoming more efficient in the way that you were running the business. What kinds of things have you discovered that help to make the business more efficient?
Yeah, well, that's really interesting. I am involved, constantly with my staff. I'm talking with my staff, talking with my wife, trying to find out what things work best for us in the office and work best with patient flow, and for the best results for the patients. And so we talk about that. We also employ other outside consultants who help us on a weekly or monthly basis to help, give us tips and to evaluate what we're doing as an outsider. So we're continuously trying to make things better. So again, and now with COVID-19, that you were talking about flow, we're looking at the patient flow again. We need to look at what's the best flow of having patients in the office these days, and how do we do that? And is that inpatient? Is that outpatient? Virtually? So there's a lot of things to consider.
So, when you look forward to the next 12 months, what do you see? Go out 12 months from now and look at what you see in your practice and your business. And if you want to talk about in Newport Beach and Orange County as well, what do you see?
Well, let's hope that COVID-19 doesn't resurge and we don't have a big second wave. Fortunately, we do see that there was a number of cases here. Obviously, LA was more affected than Orange County. But I think we need to see that everyone's still putting precautions in place. I think we're going to continue to have a lot of these precautions going forward, at least for the next 12 to 18 months. And I think until we have a vaccine that's effective and durable and widespread, I don't think we can be complacent, and we need to be careful about that. And so things are going to be different for a while. It is the new normal.
Do you think that we have come to the place where we understand that we are not protected from things like Ebola or other epidemics in the world, but that we too, as a country, are susceptible and vulnerable?
Yeah, I think this event has definitely opened our eyes. We thought this was something that just happened in third world countries. Well, it happens right here too. It's a worldwide pandemic. So it's changing. You were asking me about how things would be here in Newport Beach. And, we have patients who come, some are from Newport Beach, but they come throughout Orange County or LA, Riverside, San Diego, et cetera, throughout the state and country. Right now, we're not seeing patients really transcontinental or out of country at the moment because of travel restrictions. But I think people being on these Zoom calls has really increased awareness for, they're looking at themselves and they're noticing some irregularities or some signs of aging, or maybe a little fullness to their neck or something. So we're actually seeing a lot more calls about certain issues that probably people wouldn't have thought about before.
Oh, wow. Very interesting. Very interesting. Taking more responsibility for how I present myself.
Yeah, well, it's right in front of everybody. Everyone's staring at you.
Well, I do know that there was I think on Instagram or Facebook, there's a fellow who was rating the rooms, and he would rate what people had in their rooms that they could see behind them.
Oh, really?
And it was interesting because as he began to be go viral, people began to change what they had behind them, and it was very interesting, taking responsibility, not just saying, well, all I can do is this messy bedroom, but people taking responsibility for how they're presenting themselves.
Of course, and now you can purchase virtual backgrounds as well.
Well, absolutely, you can make your own virtual background.
Yeah, that's true.
All right, so people being more aware of how they look. Well, that's interesting because, I've been using Zoom for 10 years, so the technology was not new to me. But what I find interesting is that for many people, the transition is from, oh, now I am on camera. And before, the only people who had to really pay attention to who they were people who were literally on camera in a film or a television series.
Right.
But now you and your colleagues have your own series that you're going through.
Sure.
And many other people are now involved in their own series. And while their looks haven't changed, they become more aware of what those looks are.
Exactly. And so that's where people are saying, oh, I need to do something now about my neck, or I need to do something about this discoloration, or I'm frowning too much, or I look angry.
So then how do people find you?
Patients find me through a number of means. Of course, always the best way and the most popular way is really through word of mouth. I've been practicing now for 20 years, and so we have a lot of patients out there and a lot of people who know me. And so Fortunately, we get a lot of patients that come in that way. Of course, we have an online presence. We have a website, and we've put efforts into to get that positioned well organically. And then now, of course, social media has been something quite big over the number of years. So we've expanded we have a presence on Facebook, but a bigger presence on Instagram. And so we're trying to expand that. And we have a number of patients who come in that way. We still have some print media just to, kind of keep the brand awareness out there. And so those are a number of different ways that patients find me.
When you think about your colleagues around the country that you've been talking to, are they finding their practices impacted, or are they finding that they, like you, are having a greater number of people calling to begin to examine what they can do?
Yeah, I think a number of my colleagues are quite busy right now. Of course, there's a backlog of patients from the end of March and then April who had scheduled for surgery, and so those patients still, many of them, in fact, all of them still want to have surgery, and so we're continuing to keep up with all that. And then patients were quite interested throughout this time doing those virtual consults, and so a number of patients who have scheduled surgery. And I think my colleagues are seeing the same thing. I think we're being a little bit slower as far as introducing the non-surgical side with the injectables, with the Botox and fillers and med spa treatments, but there's other places that are going, full bore with that. And so we're just being a little bit slower on that aspect.
Well, great. This has been a very interesting conversation to bring some insight into how a physician is actually running a business successfally, even in the midst of COVID constraints. So what would you like to say to folks?
Well, I'd like your viewership and all your listeners to know that plastic surgery is still here, and there's many options available. And of course, we're doing things in a manner being respectful of COVID-19 and for their safety. So, if they're thinking about something, it's a good time. And now that we're offering, more offerings with virtual consults, that if they're having some restrictions getting in or don't want to come in the office, there's definitely ways to handle that. But they have a lot of choices, and there's a lot of good plastic surgeons around.
Well, thank you very much. This has been a lot of fun, and I really look forward to talking with you again 12 to 18 months from now to see what kind of changes have endured.
I appreciate it, Will. It's nice speaking with you.
Good. Well, this is just one more example of how businesses in California thrive.
You've been listening to the Pilgrim on the 405 with Will Christ.